another episode of Planet Hunters Coffee Chat. I'm your host, Cassie Prolongo. And of course, joining me is Nora Eister. Good to see you, Nora.
Good to see you too, Cassie. How are you?
I'm very well. Also, I'm very excited for today. Very excited. Today's our 30th episode! Woo! So, I know it seems very small, but for us, this is a big deal. What started as sort of like a hope and a dream and this would be really cool if we could do, has lasted. And, we have to thank all of our viewers. We have to thank the people who are getting more involved with this. We're starting to see a little bit more chatter on the talk forums. So we want to thank you. Thank you very much for being here, and thank you for being part of the team. We have to do a shout out to the team. Katrina, who does our social media, has been amazing, and the rest of the team who's helped us to cultivate and create this product. Yeah, what do you think about all this, Nora? It's cool, it's great, and I love hearing the feedback, and we're getting more questions from people too.
Yeah, definitely. I can't believe it's been a year and 30 episodes. Where has the time gone? I think we've come a long way, so it's exciting, and it's exciting to see some of the results from it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, 30, it's been like we've had this in our head for like a year, and then I think when we launched it, I think it was like 9 months or something like that, but we're still here. And we're putting out all this great stuff. So Nora, maybe you want to talk a little bit about what we're going to be doing today.
Yeah, so I thought today that we should go through the steps that we usually go through when we find a planet candidate to see whether it is potentially a real signal. So we've talked about all these different things, all these different tools, but today I thought we'd do a very concrete example of we would take a candidate that has been flagged on the discussion forums, and we would go through all the steps together that I would usually go through, and that other people are also going through. And it's exciting to see other people go through these steps. All right, so I think
let's do it.
We should do that.
Let's do it. But a small caveat, of course, we also very much encourage, before you dive into this process, to, if you think you have something, go into the forums still to use the talk to your peers, because that's a very important part of the process. And there's great community moderators who are there as well. So this is that, okay, yes, it's passed the checks. Now we're going to go into this sort of potential vetting process. So just a quick caveat. All right. Go for it, Nora. Let's do this.
Very important. Maybe we should start off by saying that we'll go through 7 steps. I will tell you what those 7 steps are. Those 7 steps consist of, number 1, identifying a cool candidate. Number 2, looking it up on ExoFOP. Number 3, running Latte and checking for false positives. 4, seeing whether there is a TCE report or a vetting report. Number 5, checking SIMBAD to see if there's any more information on there that you haven't found on ExoFOP. Number 6 is modeling the planet candidate, which is something that we haven't covered, but we will very briefly just show today. And number 7 is seeing whether there is other data available for this target. So we call that archival data. So we'll very briefly go through all of those steps today for one candidate.
And we'll write this up on our website too, so you don't have to remember that. But also keep reviewing this video too. That'll very much help. Excellent.
All right, taking notes?
Yeah. Yeah. Why aren't you taking notes? No, I'm just kidding.
Why aren't you taking notes?
I know. I'm one to talk.
All right. So we'll start with step number 1. Step number 1 is identifying a cool candidate. So this one is an example candidate that has been flagged on the Planet Hunters discussion forums. And as we can very briefly show, if we scroll through this, there are lots of discussions that are happening on this candidate already. So I won't scroll and give away all of it by doing that. But it's always great, as you already said, Cassie, to go through and see what other people have already said about candidate. But this is a really exciting candidate. You can see there is a transit signal just here. And I will then go to underneath, I click on the cell I to get the tick ID, because step number 2 is looking this candidate up on ExoFOP. So we can do that by going to ExoFOP. Hopefully this is looking familiar. We can type in the tick ID there, and we see what's already been said. Now you can, unfortunately for this candidate, I have already uploaded it to ExoFOP, so it's giving it slightly away that this is already a good potential planet candidate. But pretend you didn't see that, and we will pretend that this is not already a candidate on ExoFOP, and we will go through all the other checks. So some of the first things that I will check, or always check when I identify a new candidate, is the size of the star. This is 0.8 times the size of the sun, so that's good, it's not too big. Big stars can be problematic for finding planets. The mass of the sun is also sometimes important, also a little bit less massive than the sun. And the really important one that I always go on about is how bright it is. And the reason why I think it's so important to know how bright it is, because if it's bright, we can observe it and we can follow it up and potentially, you know, verify these planet candidates. But if it's faint, that becomes very, very tricky. So a V band magnitude, that's the visible magnitude, or the magnitude in the visible band is 9.8, which is great. I like things that are brighter than around 10.5, 11th magnitude. And remember, brighter is a smaller number, so 9.8 is fantastic.
Yes.
All right, so having checked that, the next step that we do, or that I would always do, is to make a latte report. So we can do that. Let's move this out of the way. I have latte up already, and we will just very quickly run that together. By doing that, we'll let that open.
And if you're like, what the heck is latte? Check back with one of our other videos too. We got it covered. We got you.
I should say, if latte doesn't work, most of the latte tests can also be run with the Jupyter or Colab notebooks that we have uploaded. So you can find those on the website. All right, well, you can see there's two sectors of data available. We'll just briefly look at both of those. Cool.
Ooh.
Right. So
that worked really quickly.
This is so exciting. I love this candidate. So we discussed this candidate in a vetting session last week. So some of you might have joined that. And as anyone who was in that session will tell you, I got really excited about this candidate. So I just got really excited by just seeing the light curve again.
Yeah, but that's why we love doing this, because you're all excited, and we love this for the love of science. But of course, we want to get the astronomers excited. I would be like stoked if that astronomer was like, "Oh, this is looking really good." I'd be like, "Oh."
I need to do this for every light curve that that looks exciting. I'm like, this is the best thing that's ever happened. Anyway. Okay, cool. So the reason why this is so exciting is, well, first of all, it's bright, which, you know, I always like. But also, it looks like there are two different signals in this. So we can see this very obvious deep signal, but then there are two other signals in there. So we can see that first one a little bit more. That's the one we saw in talk on the discussion forums. We can see that one there. And then if we go to the next sector, we can see that deeper one, and then we can see another shallower one. So this could be, I'm not saying it is, but it could be two planets, one which only shows one transit event, and another which shows two transit events. Ooh. So what we will do is we will mark those on here. We'll record these times. Maybe we'll do the little ones first, and then we will do the big one. The order of this doesn't matter, but just helps me keep track. All right, and we will let that run. All right, that will take a moment to run. So instead of waiting for that to run, we will actually just get up a version of this report that I've already generated. So,
it's not cheating, it's just strategizing, it's efficiency.
Exactly.
How long do they normally take to run, Nora? Sometimes.
Not that long. It'll take like a minute or so. This is just quicker.
Okay. Yeah, I'm saying, woo! And there it is.
There it is. And they're still looking great. Look how cute they are.
Sorry, I'm going to have to call this the Charlie Brown report, you know, because it looks like Charlie Brown.
So I've actually so we internally in our team, we give planets that we like nicknames. It just becomes easier to remember them. So the last planet that we published that looked slightly similar to this, because it also had one deep transit and two little ones, I gave it the nickname Edifix. It's the dog in Asterix and Obelix in the comics.
Oh my God. That's so cute.
So this one, because it looks similar, I've given this one the nickname of Asterix, because, you know, Asterix and
Okay.
Obelix and the dog. So if we find another one of these, then that will be called Obelix. But anyway, that was a little aside.
I like it. See, whatever makes science fun.
Exactly. All right, so we'll very quickly go through this. So the light curve still looks great. We have that deeper transit. We have the two slightly less deep transits. This is all the information that we already saw on ExoFOP, so nothing new there. We just want to very quickly check that there are no obvious false positives in this. So there's nothing obvious in the background. There's nothing obvious here in the centroid positions. The light curves extracted with 2 different aperture sizes also look consistent with one another, which is fantastic. This is also a good test to do. So this is the difference image that we've talked about quite a lot. We want to make sure that that signal is on target. And it looks that way. Maybe in that middle one, it looks like maybe it moves a tiny amount. But because the other 2 are on target, I am not too worried about that for the time being. And the reason why I'm not too worried about it for the time being is that because in this image here, we can see that there is nothing bright nearby. This is definitely the brightest thing in the surrounding area. So like I said, I'm not too worried about it.
Right.
All right, this one is good. It's not showing any similar events in the nearby light curves. So this is not due to a large scale systematic effect. And this is probably my favorite diagnostic plot, which shows the pixel by pixel light curve plots. Now, again, for this one, this always in the latte reports only shows it for the first transit event that you marked. In this case, it's quite difficult to see it in that one because that is one of the smaller ones. So what I'll instead do is I will get up one of those other ones. You can see those here. They are also saved in that same folder. This is for that second one that we marked. So the one, another small one. You can see there is a small dip here in that yellow pixel. That's the pixel where our target is. So it's all looking good.
So if you are a citizen scientist at this point, you are extremely excited because it is so far, you're hitting every green light as you get to that store. You thought it was going to take you 30 minutes and you're like, I think it's going to take me like 10 to 15 now. So this is very exciting. Of course, you know, and we're just trying to say, you know, this is, of course, going back and talking to your peers and Talk Forum. That's an important part of like the science process, but these are things that you can do yourself. So this is exciting, being able to do that.
Oh, definitely, yeah. And yeah, as we said, so you can run Latte unless you have a Windows machine, in which case it probably won't work. But even if you have a Windows machine or you haven't installed Latte, you can run most of these diagnostic plots with the tools online that we have given. All right, very quickly, this is a phase folded light curve. Not very helpful in this case because it's 3 events, so it's not knowing how to phase fold. Just ignore that plot. This is a periodogram, so there are no pulsations or no obvious pulsations that we can see given the data that we have. And finally, this gives us an idea of what type of star that we are looking at. So in red there, we have, this is the mass of the sun. So our sun will follow this track over the course of its life. So we have a slightly less massive star than our sun. We have one that's slightly colder. The axes are reverted, slightly confusing. And it's slightly smaller. Which again are just things we already saw on ExoFOP and in that table at the start of this, but sometimes it's just nice to see it in a figure like this.
All of these graphs are beautiful, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
They really are. They're quite stunning to look at, and they're laid out anyway. It's just they're laid out in such a way that is just it's easy for me to digest and go through each of these individually.
That's great. That's what we want.
Yep. Okay. So this passed the latte test.
It did, which is so exciting. Okay. Tick to latte test so we can close that. I will then get the internet back up. So the next thing the next thing on our list of things to do is to check exo.MAST and to see whether there is a TCE report. Now, if you are a keen user of Latte, you will know that if there is a TCE report, that will also be listed in the Latte report, and there will be a link in there. But we can also check that on exo.MAST. We can type in tick and then our tick ID, and because nothing comes up, that means it has not been flagged as a TCE. So it was not a threshold crossing event. It has not been flagged by the automated pipeline, which is exciting.
Continue, the green lights continue on.
Exactly. All right, the next thing to do is we can also go to SIMBAD just to make sure whether there is any additional information on this target on there. So we'll go to by identifier. So when we did the episode on this, I said that it doesn't SIMBAD doesn't recognize tick IDs. Turns out that is false. Someone posted underneath the video to say that that was incorrect. So thank you to whoever pointed that out last time, because it has honestly changed my life. It has just made everything I do so much quicker, because I use SIMBAD quite a lot and I used to just waste so much time going over to ExoFOP and copying and pasting things over. So thank you.
Learning experience. See, this goes both ways. We give you a little bit of stuff and then you come back and correct it for us. It's the process of science, you know. Excellent. All right. So this is step, I want to just clarify, is this step number 5, Nora?
This is step number 5, yes.
Okay. So we're on step 5 now in SIMBAD. Okay.
Yes, so what we can see on SIMBAD, this will be very quick, we can see it has a BD number. So if it has other names that have sometimes shorter names, it usually means that they're bright. They've been observed in lots of other catalogues. Other things we can see on here is we can see the magnitudes. This is nothing new. We can see that the spectral type, so the type of star that it is, it's a G5 star. So for comparison, our sun is a G2 star. The naming scheme is very strange. It goes O star is the hottest star and M star is the coolest star, and then you have a random sequence of letters in between. But what I'm trying to say is that the G-type star is like our sun, similar to our sun in terms of its properties. And the other thing that we can see here is that it's a high proper motion star. So that just means that the motion of this star, or the apparent motion of this star on the sky, is fast compared to other stars. And that just means that it's relatively close by. So one way to see that is, for example, if you put your finger up in front of your thumb in front of your face, and then you open one eye and then close the other eye, your thumb moves more than the background objects, and that's because it's closer. Right. So that would be similar to this. Okay, so we've checked SIMBAD. There's not really any new or not too much new information on here, but it's always good to check it on there anyway.
Is there anything in particular that they have to zoom in on with SIMBAD, or is it just to make sure they go through and everything looks like it looks okay?
Just make sure that everything looks okay. Sometimes if it's an eclipsing binary and it's a known eclipsing binary, that will be listed here. So it's good that this is not an eclipsing binary, or if it's a known planet, it would also be listed here.
Gotcha.
So yeah, it makes sense to double check that. Now, another thing you can do on SIMBAD, now that we're talking about it, I almost forgot to do this. Another thing we can do on SIMBAD is we can check whether this star has appeared in any published papers. So we can do that by going down here to references.
Right.
And if we click display, it will list all of the kind of papers, all the publications where this target has been mentioned. And the exciting thing about this is that we can see that it's been listed in this one here, this top one, which is Public HARPS Radial Velocity Database. So what this suggests, doesn't necessarily mean that, but what it suggests is that this target has been observed by an instrument called HARPS. It's been monitored with radial velocities, and we will come back to that in step number 7.
Okay.
But before we do that, now having checked that it's not a false positive, as far as we can tell based on the data that we have available, we've checked that it's bright. It's not necessarily important for the next step, but that's exciting. We've checked all these other things. The next thing that I would always do is I would model the transit events. Now, as I already mentioned, this is not something that we have done. It is a little bit complicated. We will cover it in a future episode, but for the time being, we're not going to cover it right now. I'm just going to show you the results from that.
Okay.
So when I model a transit event or transit events, I use a tool called Pinetti, which was developed by Oscar, who's a member of our team, and he's fantastic. And I use that tool, and as I said, it's a little bit complicated to use. So for now, I will just show you the results. So here we have the deeper transit modeled, which you can see the data points, and the black shows the model. And underneath you can see the residual. So if you have the data, you remove that model, that's what's left over. So this would be similar to the kind of models you would see in the TCE reports, if they exist.
Yeah.
We have another model for the 2 transit planet candidate.
Yeah.
Here we just have the gray points show the all of the data, and the green points show the binned data. So if you bin it into 10-minute kind of data points, that is what you get. And you can see both of them look really nice.
Yeah. Yeah, we definitely have to do an episode on this because I'm curious to know how citizen scientists can do the modeling as well. That's really cool.
Yeah, definitely. We'll cover it at some point.
Yeah.
Modeling planet candidates is very exciting. So another output from PyNeti is this is a file that has lots of information in it based on the modeling. So these would be stellar parameters, stellar and planet parameters derived from the model of the transit. So if we zoom in on this a little bit, you can see there are things such as the T0, so the time of the transit event. You have the orbital period. So this, for this example here, this is of the 2 transit planet candidate. So what's important from this that I would look at, again, similar to the TCE reports, is the size of the planet candidate, so around 2.5, 2.7 Earth radii.
So, okay, so this is step 6. Was there anything else before we do the final step, step 7?
No, so that was the modeling. Everything in the model looked good. The model worked. We got a good model that seems to make sense. So everything is looking really, really great. Yeah. So the final step that we will do is we will look to see whether there's any archival data. So because this is a bright target, this will be more important for bright targets. The chances are that someone else has looked at this target at some other point in time. So there are a number of things that we can check. An important one that we'll look at for this candidate is the ESO archive. So ESO is the European Southern Observatory. They have lots and lots of telescopes down in Chile, and they observe targets, things. They observe the sky. So sometimes the data is publicly available, and as we already saw from SIMBAD down here, this target has likely been observed by HARPS, and HARPS is an ESO telescope. Beware, there is HARPS South or HARPS, and there is HARPS North. HARPS North is in La Palma, but this is a southern target, so we'll look at the HARPS data on ESO. So the way we can do that is we can go to archive.eso.org. We can go to the science portal. I should also put a bit of a caveat on this. A lot of targets won't have any data, but we'll check for this one.
It's good to check just to see, and it gets you, and it's another resource, guys. This is something to put in your toolbox as well, things to work on.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, we can search by the tick ID, which is great. I think these are all linked to SIMBAD, so I think.
Yeah. Oh, look at that.
So yeah, we can, on the side here, we can say we only want to see the spectra, and you can see that this target has been observed. It has got spectra, both from, if we scroll over here, both from an instrument called HARPS and from an instrument called Theros. Unfortunately, I haven't had the time to look at these. These could show us that this is an eclipsing binary and isn't a planet. This could show us a lot of different things, but I guess time will tell as to whether, once I've had time to look into these, or someone has had time to look into these, maybe that will give us more of a clue as to whether we want to follow this candidate up even more, or whether it is in fact a false positive.
It's fantastic. And what's exciting is that for this, I know we didn't do a lot of like troubleshooting per se with this, like what would happen. Okay, if you hit like a red light as opposed to hitting a green light throughout this entire process, what would be the best thing for citizen science to do if, it didn't pass this marker, like let's say in step 2 or 3, it didn't go through, it didn't pass that. Is that a good time to go back and review other things, or try to figure out why it didn't pass, or is that it's like blip at that point, it's done?
So if it's a very obvious false positive, then it can just be ruled out. Unfortunately, we're not going to pursue that one any further. Yeah. If it's an eclipsing binary, for example, if the transit is too deep, if it's an on-target eclipsing binary, it's very useful to flag that on the discussion forums. All eclipsing binaries get passed on to the eclipsing binary working group, and they do lots of really exciting science with that. But yeah, if it's due to, I guess if it's an asteroid, that's also kind of cool. We can also flag those. It's always great to report the findings on the discussion forums to say why it passed or didn't pass the tests. So that's great for the science team to know. It's also great for other citizen scientists to know. It's just great to share the knowledge so that we don't all do the same analysis over and over again and waste each other's time.
Yeah, collaborative teamwork is what it is. We're all doing it. That's what makes it fun and exciting. Wow. Okay. So this was one of our longer episodes, but this was a special one, not only because it's our 30th, but because now you have a pretty good idea of going through and doing a number of these vetting processes yourself. Of course, like we said before, and we want to really reiterate, going into the talk forum should always be your first step of this process, because it's good to talk to your peers. And it's also good to see if, like what Nora said, if somebody's already done something like this, you want to make sure that, you don't want to quote unquote waste your time, but you could do it just for, to see what happens, but it's not going to be a candidate at that point. So Nora, this was really cool. We hope that you enjoyed going through this. We have not been able to do the modeling, obviously, in this, so we'll do that into a separate episode or two in the future. This was great. Anything else that you want to mention, Nora, before we close out this 30th episode?
I can't believe it's our 30th. That's 30th. I can't even talk. I can't believe it's our 30th episode.
You're excited. You can't even talk.
I know.
It's crazy.
It's so crazy. Yeah, I hope it was useful. So yeah, these are just kind of the steps that I would go through to look at a candidate, to investigate it. So hopefully most of those steps are things we've covered already, and are steps that you could do at home. Yeah.
Very cool. All right, great. Well, thank you very much for joining us. And thank you as always, Nora. I will see you next week. Okay.
Thank you.